Resistance within the White House rises. An anonymous op-ed and a scathing insider book question the president's mental competence and morality. How will Donald J. Trump weather the latest storm? On Capitol Hill, conservative jurist Brett Kavanaugh under siege by Senate Democrats. Will the Trump nominee scrape through partisan warfare to serve on the nation's highest court? Here at home, the mayor's team threatens nearly 1,000 layoffs if firefighters win pay parity with cops. Could the financial consequence be genuine, or is it a scare tactic to confuse voters? And in the Lone Star State's hottest race, the battle between Cruz and Beto ramps up with dueling rallies in the Bayou City. I'm Greg Grugan, and welcome to Watch Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Starting us off, former Republican Congressional candidate Rick Walker. Next up, progressive commentator and attorney Nyanza Moore. In the 3 spot, Bob Price, associate editor of Breitbart, Texas. Batting cleanup, Professor Craig Jackson of the Thurgood Marshall School of Law. Next up, businessman, columnist, and former Kemah mayor, Bill King. And closing us out on the hot corner, Chicano activist and educator, Tony Diaz. Let's do this. What is a president to do when a senior member of the administration publishes an anonymous op-ed in the New York Times labeling the commander-in-chief amoral, impetuous, adversarial, petty, and ineffective? What should the nation think when this same insider claims many serving Donald J. Trump are working from within to thwart the president's misguided impulses and preference for autocrats and dictators? What is the world to think when journalist Bob Woodward's new book, released, advances the contention that the leader of the free world is a congenital liar? And what are undecided midterm voters to think of GOP congressional incumbents who continue to stand by the president, warts and all? Here's a taste of Mr. Trump's reaction.
Can you tell me about some anonymous source within the administration, probably who's failing and probably here for all the wrong reasons?
Get this to sound.
Okay, everybody. Tony Diaz, what do you think of all this coming down on the president?
The quote is crazy town, according to Bob Woodward's book. But also I want to remind Trump that Chicanos are the most loyal, but he didn't hire any because he claimed that he was going to hire only the best for his administration. His administration, or crazy town, consists of convicted people, indicted people, and flippers. And he invented a new form of flipping, which is where you write an anonymous op-ed for the New York Times. The real question is who knew grammar well enough to get published in the New York Times is really the main question. Because at the end of the day, here's what's funny, is that Trump basically says he likes loyalists. They're mad at the New York Times because that person told the truth. And Trump is always flipping. He's flipped on Ted Cruz. Before, he said Cruz was lying, Ted Cruz. Now evidently he's going to endorse him, so I'm not sure which is the truth. So a liar flips when he tells the truth, but I can't tell which is which. And I'm glad that finally some people are telling the world that they're asking for help. They're asking for help to tell people that they're trying to hold things together because Trump doesn't know what he's doing and his own team's turning against him.
Bob Price, does this kind of stuff, this continuing avalanche of accusations, does it change any Republican votes?
No. And here's why. First, let's go back to the point here of this New York Times editorial. What is a senior administration official? You know, a high-ranking officer in the military is a colonel. There's tens of thousands of colonels in there. That doesn't mean they have anything to do with policy. A senior administration official, what is that? Now, that said, I'm going to quote President Obama here for once and say he was right when he said, this is not how democracy works. Nobody elected you. You're not accountable to anybody. And that's not the way this country is supposed to work. He took an oath of office to faithfully execute his duties. That doesn't mean you undermine the administration that was duly elected by the Constitution and the people of the United States. This is an outrageous step by someone. And one other thing I'll say as a writer, writing has a voice. And people can recognize your writing by your voice in what you write.
And somebody will recognize that and come forward and identify who that person is.
Rick, quickly, your read on this. Is it changing any votes? Is the president losing credibility with any of his base?
No, he's losing no credibility whatsoever. This op-ed is just totally bogus. The New York Times shouldn't even published it. Aristotle told us that you can't validate a document unless you can validate the source first, and the source isn't credible. The document isn't credible. So there's no source identification here, so that you can't determine the credibility of the document.
Okay, we're going to move on. As if on cue, the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, chimed in forcefully in a Friday speech that's very likely to be followed by many more before the critical midterms.
Appealing to tribe, appealing to fear, pitting one group against another, telling people that order and security will be restored if it weren't for those who don't look like us or don't sound like us or don't pray like we do. That's an old playbook.
Okay, Nyanza, can the 44th president have an impact on the midterms?
Well, obviously he can, because we're talking about him today. So I love President Obama. Here's the thing. He's holding at 74% approval rating right now, and Michelle Obama is at 90% approval rating. So I think that our president, my president, Obama, Scholar, what it is, where President Obama is leading the charge, Michelle Obama will come up at the end. And I really do believe that his deciding to exile himself from the political process and let President Trump have his own space and do what he ever thinks, it was time out for that, because after John McCain's funeral, when the Republicans decided to say, oh, that was controversial, we need to hit him back, we like seeing President Obama next to President Bush giving speeches in a bipartisan way. And then, so now when President Obama is back out on the campaign trail, he's finally speaking truth to power in a larger voice. He can sell out a theater, even if the ticket's worth $1,000. We would still want to go hear President Obama because we still wish he was still the president. Okay, Bill King, both of these issues.
Yeah, I don't know that any of this changes a lot of minds, but what it does do is affect turnout. And all the enthusiasm is on the left right now. I think there's a lot of Republicans that are going to look at this and say, I'm not going to go vote for a Democrat, but you know, I'm tired of all this and I'm just not going to go vote. And you see that sort of in the people they're showing for rallies and in the signs on the street and all that. I think the Democrats are going to have a pretty good midterm unless things change dramatically between now and then. And I think this is mostly a turnout issue.
Okay. Craig, I want your opinion on the type of information that's coming out and whether it creates or starts, I guess, any momentum towards a constitutional crisis. Also, your thoughts on President Obama getting back into the political game.
I think that it does turn some independents. I think it will affect turnout. I think it's going to be that and the issue of the anonymous letter. I think it's going to affect the election. As far as the anonymous letter is concerned, there's nothing illegal about it. It's nothing having to do with national security. It's freedom of speech. It's the idea that it will be termed national security is kind of shocking. It's a revelation about the president. And more to the fact is that, you know, there's a lot of talk about whether or not they're right or correct or heroic on both left and right. They do seem to be persons who are at least saving us from some disasters. So that is something to be concerned about. Okay, Bob, little rebuttal?
Yeah, first off, imagine if the Declaration of Independence had been signed John Doe by everybody. What power would that document have had? An anonymous document has little to no power except for those that already believe what the document says. So in terms of President Obama's speech, I listened to the entire speech. It was a great speech. He reads a speech better than probably anybody out on the campaign trail today. But during his administration, he was effective at two things. One, selling guns. Two, turning out Republican votes in midterm elections.
Okay, Nyanza, is this presidency unraveling? Real quick.
Yes, and you know, unfortunately the adults in the room didn't invoke the 25th Amendment, so they weren't doing their adulting that day.
Okay, we're going to leave it right there. When we return, combat on Capitol Hill as Senate Democrats seek to torpedo the Kavanaugh nomination. We shall dissect the chaotic hearings after the break.